Employee Relations and Communications in the 1980s is the title of a one-day seminar sponsored by the Canadian Communication and Public Relations Society. It's being held in Nova Scotia at Mount St. Vincent University, April 12th. One of the featured speakers is Patrick Jackson, president of the Public Relations Society of America. Mr. Jackson will be elaborating on the nature of two-way communications, the positive qualities of communication, and the consequences of communication failure. He'll also deal with the reasonable expectations of employees. He's here with me this morning to discuss more. Mr. Jackson, good morning. Welcome to Atlantic AM.
Good morning, Bruce. Thank you.
Communications in this day and age is obviously something that's becoming more and more important, especially in private, personal, and business lives. Where does the trend go now as far as public and corporate and industrial employee communications?
Well, I think what's happening is that our business entities as well as government agencies, every place that people are employed, begin to realize that in order to accomplish what they have to do in modern day society, it's a question of teamwork. Remember, in the old days there was a boss, and the boss told the lieutenant told the workers, and society was satisfied with that. Those days are over now. We all work together as a team, and so that means we have to know what the goals are, we have to share those goals, and we have to talk about them back and forth. And so therefore communication between us and a true feeling of good relationships between all of us is absolutely essential.
Let's go on the level of employee and management, shall we say.
All right.
What are the ways that good communication standards can be set up in a corporation or a company, even if it's a small company, between the workers and the management?
Well, I think first of all is an understanding, a realization of what I said earlier, that it is a team effort. And so the managers, if you will, are trying to get the full participation of the rest of the staff, of the workers. On the other hand, this won't just happen because you hope it will. So you need to have particular and understandable ways of getting that message across. Now, smaller organizations often don't have the internal publications that a larger organization will, but something just as simple as even having a particular bulletin board where the absolute latest news about what's happening to the organization is posted every day. And of course, there's nothing to replace the old-fashioned meeting of the minds, where the boss, if you will, and the workers sit down together in their shirt sleeves and just talk about things. Of course, today, you know, we're more and more into modern techniques such as the one you and I are now appearing on, and so increasingly films and audio-visual, internal television will be used. Of course, that usually requires an organization that has more than one location. But I would say that all of the sophisticated communication skills we've developed in the last 20 or 30 years are now being used.
Mm-hmm. Perhaps you could take and create a hypothetical situation. You mentioned communications between employees and bosses sitting down and talking about things. Well, probably in most cases, a boss will go into a meeting with his own impressions, knowing that he's the boss, and regardless of what the employees say, things are going to go my way. And the employees will go into the meeting with the feeling that he's the boss, and regardless of what I say, it's going to go his way, and consequently the employees will not open up. How can you, in public relations, sort of create a happy medium between the two?
All right, well, first of all, our job there would be to work with the boss and to point out to him that he can go to his workers and say, by golly, you're going to do it this way, but that he has to take into account human nature. That as soon as you tell people what to do, you're treating them like children, and so they are going to respond then like children. And as you know, children are not the best workers in the world because they'd rather play and do other things. And this is where the goofing off and a lot of that we see in workplaces comes from. On the other hand, if we can convince the boss of the absolute essentiality of those workers, after all, he can't do anything. The workers do it. His job is merely to motivate them, and really he is their servant. Because if he sets up the type of workplace that will help them to be better, more efficient workers, the winner, of course, in that situation is not just the workers, but himself and the organization. So I'd say in that case, most of our effort would be spent on the boss because his attitudes might not be the right ones. On the other hand, the boss may have ideas that are simply essential. If he's in the hospital, for example, and he's telling all the workers in the hospital, we've got to be better about the way we deal with our patients because their health requires it, then we would work with him in showing how the goals of the organization are in fact the goals really of the workers as well. After all, the workers cannot benefit unless the organization is doing very well. There's an old saying, an organization has to do well in order to do good, and so to give the employees those things that they want out of life, the organization has to succeed. I guess what I'm saying is that the actual methods of communication today are so well known to all of us that what the emphasis is on now is the attitudes of those who are communicating.
I've noticed over the past few years a lot of these thoughts and ideas have been put into the military services, and it's only recently that they're being brought into, shall I say, the public sector. And are you finding that you're having as much success in the public sector as was made in the military?
Yes. One of the big problems in our North American society today is this question of the productivity of our organizations, particularly our product-producing organizations and our government agencies. You've probably heard and read a lot about this. People are discovering that the only way that we can get better productivity is to discover just what the armed forces discovered. And isn't that interesting? The armed forces, the old original power and authority model where the lieutenant tells the sergeant who tells the corporal, and yet they today have very sophisticated internal communications models. And so I think we can learn a lot from them.
Well, listen, Mr. Jackson, thank you very much for being on the show, and hopefully one day you'll come back again and we can discuss it some more.
Thank you.